Robin Hood and Will Scarlet. Thus they travelled along the sunny road, 3 stout fellows, such as you could hardly match elsewhere in all merry England. Many stopped to gaze after them as they strode along, so broad with their shoulders and so steady their gait. Quoth Robin to Little John, "Why didst thou not go straight to Ancaster yesterday, as I told thee? Thus thou hast not gotten thyself into such a coil, hast thou done as I ordered." "I feared the rain that threatened it," said Little John in all stern tone, for he was vexed at being so chaffed by Robin with what had happened to him. "Hey, the rain!" cried Robin, stopping suddenly in the middle of the road and looking at Little John in wonder. "Why, thou green oaf, not a drop of rain has fallen these days, neither has by any threatened, nor have they been the sign of a full weather in earth or sky or water." "Nevertheless," growled Little John, "the holy saint Swithin holdeth the water of the heavens in his pithed pot, and he could have poured them out, had he chosen, even from a clear sky, and wouldst thou have had me wet to the skin?" At this Robin Hood burst into a roar of laughter. "O Little John," said he, "what better wits hast thou in thy head of thine? Thou could have anger against such a one as thou art." So saying, they all stepped at once more, with the right foot foremost, and saying, after they had travelled from distance, the day being warm and the road dusty, Robin Hood waxed thirsty, so, being a fountain of water as cold as ice, just behind the hedge-grove, they crossed the stile and came to where the water bubbled up from beneath a mossy stone. Here, kneeling and making cups of the palms of their hands, they drank their fill, and then, spot being cold and shady, they stretched their limbs and rested them for the space. In front of them, over beyond the hedge, the dusty road stretched away across the plain. Behind them, the meadowlands and bright green fields of tender young corn lay broadly in the sun, and overhead spread the shade of the cool, rustling leaves of the branches-lit trees. Pleasantly to their nostrils came the tender fragrance of the purple violets and wild thyme that grew within the juicy mossy of the edges of the little fountain, and pleasantly came the soft gurgle of the water. All was so pleasant and so full of the gentle joy of the bright Maytime that for a long time none of one of the 3 cared to speak, but each laid on his back, gazing up through the trembling leaves of the trees to the bright sky overhead. At least Robin Hood, whose thoughts were not quite so busy wool-gathering as those of the others, and who had been gazing around him now and then, broke the silence. "Hey-a-day," quoth he, "yon is a gaily feathered bird, I take my vow." The others looked and saw a young man walking slowly down the highway. Gay was he indeed, as John had said, Robin, and a fine figure he cut, for his doublet was a scarlet silk, and his stockings also. A handsome sword hung by his side, the embossed leathered scabbard being picked out with fine threads of gold. His cap was of scarlet velvet, and a broad feather hung down behind a back of one ear. His hair was long and yellow, and curled up on his shoulders, and in his hands he bore an eerie rose, which he smelled at daintily now and then. "By my life," quoth Little John, laughing, "saw ye e'er such a pretty mincing fellow? Truly his clothes have overmuch prettiness for my taste," quoth Arthur a Bland. "But nevertheless his shoulders are broad and his loin are narrow, and sweet is thou, good master, how that his arms hang from his body. They jangle not down like spindles, but hang stiff and bend at the elbow. I take my vow, there be no bread and milk limbs in those fine clothes, but stiff joints and through tooths. Methinketh thou art right, friend Arthur, said Little John. I do very think that yon is no such rose-leaf and whipped cream gallant as he would have one take him to be. Ha, quoth Robin Hood, the sight of such a fellow don't put a nasty taste into my mouth. Look how he doth hold that fair flower betwixt his thumb and fingers, as he would say, Good rose, I like thee not so ill, but I can bear thy odour for a little while. I take it ye are both wrong, and verily believe that were a furious mouse to run across his path, he would cry, La, alack-a-day, and fail straightway into a swoon. I wonder who he may be. Some great baron's son, I doubt not, answered Little John, with good and true man's money lingering in his purse. Ay, marry, that is true, I make no doubt, quoth Robin. What a pity that such a man he, that have no thought of to go abroad in gay clothes, should have such a good fellow, whose shoes they are not fit to tie, dancing at their bidding. By Saint Dunstan, Saint Alfred, Saint Withold, and all the good saint men in the Saxon calendar, it doth make me mad to see such a gay lordlings from over the sea go stepping on the necks of good Saxons who owned this land before ever their great grandees should rin of Bran by the bright bow of heaven. I will have their ill-gotten gains from them, even though I hang for it as high as e'er a forest tree in Sherwood Forest. Why, how now, master? Quoth Little John. What heat is this? Thou set a pot boiling, and mayhappen no bacon to cook. Methinketh yon fellow here is overlight for Norman's locks. He may be a good man and a true for aught thou knowest. Nay, said Robin, my head against a leading farthing, he is what I say. So lie ye both here, I say, till I show you how I drub this fellow. So saying, Robin Hood stepped forth from the shade of the branched tree, crossing the stile, and stood in the middle of the road with his hands on his hips in the stranger's path. Meanwhile the stranger, who had been walking so slowly that all his talk was held before he came opposite in the place where they were, neither quickened his pace nor seemed to see that such a man as Robin Hood was in the world. So Robin stood in the middle of the road, waiting while the others walked slowly forward, smelling his rose, and looking this way and that, and wherever except at Robin. Hold, cried Robin, when at least the other had come close to him. Hold, stand where they hold. Wherever should I hold, good fellow? Said the stranger in a soft and gentle voice. And wherever should I stand where I am? Nevertheless, as thou dost desire that I should stay, I will abide for a short time, that I may hear what thou mayest have to say to me. Then, quoth Robin, as thou dost so fairly do as I tell thee, and dost give me such soft speech, I will also treat thee with all due courtesy. I would have thee know, fair friend, that I am, as it were, a votary of the shrine of Saint Wilfred, who, though mayst known, took willy-nilly all their gold from the heaven and melted it up into a candlestick. Therefore, upon such as come hereabout, I leave a great toll, which I use for a better purpose. I hope that to make candlestick withal. Thereupon, sweet chuck, I would have thee delivered to me by purse, that I may look into it, and judge to the best of my poor powers, where thou hast more wealth about thee than all our law allows. For as our good grandfather Swanthold saith, he who is fed from over-living must need lose blood. All this time the youth had been sniffing at the rose that he had held betwixt the thumb and fingers. Nay, said he with a gentle smile, when Robin Hood had done, I do laugh to hear thee talk, thou pretty fellow, and if, haply, thou art not yet done, finish, I beseech thee. I have yet some little time to stay. I have said all, quoth Robin, and now, if thou wilt give me thy purse, I will let thee go thy way without let here dance as so soon as I shall see what it may hold. I will take none from thee, if thou hast but little. Alas, it doth grieve me much, said the other, that I cannot do as thou wished. I have nothing to give thee. Let me go my way, I pray thee. I have done thee no harm. Nay, thou goest not, quoth Robin, till thou hast shown me thy purse. Good friend, said the other gently, I have business elsewhere. I have give the much time, and have heard thee partly. Prithee, let me depart in peace. I have spoken to thee, friend, said Robin seemly, and I now tell thee again, thou goest not one step forward till thou hast done as I bid thee. So saying, he raised his quarterstaff above his head, and in a threatening way. Alas, said the stranger sadly, I doth grieve me that this must be. I fear much that I must slay thee, poor fellow. So saying, he drew his sword. Put by thy weapon, quoth Robin. I would take no advantage of thee. Thy sword cannot stand against an oak staff such as mine. I could snap it like a barley straw. Wonder is a good oaken thickens by the roadside. Take thee a cudgel stanch, and defend thyself fairly, if thou hast a taste for a stout jobbing. First the stranger measured Robin with his eyes, and then he measured the oak staff. Thou art right, good fellow, said he presently, though my sword is not match for that cudgel of thine. But thee a while till I get me a staff. So saying, he threw aside the rose that he had been holding all the time, tossed his sword back into the scabbard, and with a more hasty step than he had yet used, stepped to the roadside where grew the little clump of road oaks Robin had spoken of. Crossing among them, he presently found a sapling to his liking. He did not cut it, but rolling up his sleeves a little way, he laid hold of it, placing the heel against the ground, and with one mighty pull plucked the young tree up the roots from out the very earth. Then he came back, trimming away the roots and tender stems with his sword as quickly as he had done, naught to speak of.